There is no shortcut when it comes to learning languages. None. And you can Google it right now, and you will find books that are called Learn German in 30 Days, and Learn German in 7 Days, and Learn German in 48 Hours. And there are so many YouTube channels selling you the dream that there was this secret shortcut, there was this path you didn't know about, there was this technique. I talked about this with my girlfriend today, and so this is something that's changed a lot. So we're not yet at 3 years, this relationship, right? But we're past 2 years. At the beginning of this relationship, we talked about language learning and language teaching, and it was largely hypothetical for my girlfriend, whereas I had a lot of real-world experience. And then just in the space of 2 years, now she's got more and more experience. There is no shortcut. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the biological reality of language acquisition as opposed to the cultural reality. And you know what else? It's not rewarding in the way that people think it is or the way that people say it is. I don't read as much as I used to because I'm busy learning languages. Sorry, I got books here right now. Right, I got a great book here on political corruption and democracy in China. I don't know when I'm going to find time to read this book. I'd love to do a book review on this channel. But if I'm, okay, so these are both related to China. So I can't read this book about politics and history of China because I'm going to be busy memorizing incredibly simple sentences out of this book, doing language learning, language rote memorization, language practice, so on and so forth. So there's a really simple, direct sense in which language learning makes your life worse, makes your life less meaningful, makes your life less rewarding. And on the other hand, I'm spoiled. I've studied so many languages for so many years. I am accustomed to getting off an airplane and being able to speak enough French. We get off the airplane in Germany. This even happened. We switched planes in Germany. And speak enough German. And within Asia, speaking Chinese, speaking Thai, probably if I had to, I could go back to speaking enough Japanese. Not easily. The places I've been flying in and out of, I am really accustomed to saying, pardon me, thank you, how much does this cost? Knowing the numbers, even if it's just that level of interaction with buying groceries, being able to do it. And here I am now in Athens, Greece, and I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that I don't speak enough of this language already, instantly, to be able to ask people, how much does this cost? Pardon me, sorry, excuse me, whatever, those kinds of interactions from the day I got off the plane. And you know what? I own the books. So I have the temptation to think over now, how much time do I want to put into reading these books? But again, language study, it competes with studying the philosophy, the history, the politics, things that are really more meaningful and more rewarding. If I spend the time doing rote memorization on Greek vocabulary, Greek sentence structure, Greek grammar, that's time when I'm not even reading the Greek newspaper, let alone the philosophy of Aristotle or, whatever. There's a lot. Greek political history is really deep. I could be studying the Ottoman Empire period. I could be studying the current unfolding, political situation, special agreement between Greece and the United States, Greece versus Turkey, Greece and China. There's a lot of interesting stuff I could be reading and learning about and doing instead of learning languages. So sorry. This may sound like a digression, but for many of you, this may be the main point of the video. This may be something really important for you to think about and consider and take seriously, is that learning languages is not meaningful in the way that people say it is. But at the same time, I've got to admit, I don't even feel like it's my own ego. I feel like it's the opposite of ego. When I was at the airport in Germany, I had to switch into German, and I could speak German well enough. If you guys don't know, I'm vegan, so it's like, you have to ask, does this contain cheese? You have to say, of course, how much does this cost? Some really simple stuff like this in German. I switch into speaking German just for that little time in the airport. And in front of me, in line, in the same shop, there were like 3 French women together, traveling as a group, and they just spoke French with making absolutely no effort, like no effort to slow down or simplify their French, no effort to be clear, but no effort to speak German whatsoever, even though they're German, nor did they attempt to speak English. And the staff, this restaurant, they were kind of struggling with it. And of course, the amusing thing is, once in a while, one of them figured it out. It's like they'd be saying the French word for sausage, and then they'd be like, oh, they mean sausage, to the German word for sausage. And the the words are fundamentally similar. Often they have a shared etymology or shared, components linguistically. These language barriers are not as daunting as Chinese versus English, as Cree and Ojibwe versus English. These are huge, impassable, insuperable, language barriers. But look, what I'm saying is, I don't think it's ego in a positive sense that I want to be able to speak German in Germany, even if it's just for that little bit of interaction. I think it's a kind of humility. Like, look, I'm in your country. I'm making the effort to speak your language. I feel that way in Canada with the Cree and Ojibwe and the Mohawk and everything else. I really refuse to accept the genocide. I want to speak their language if I'm in their country. Most white people don't seem to feel that way for some mysterious reason of nationalist ideology. And on the contrary, I think it takes a really kind of pernicious egotism. Let's not say egoism, but egotism. It's a really strange thing to just go to another country and just speak English, speak your own language, whether it's English or French. Like these women, they were buying croissant in. They were buying a whole bunch of stuff. It was a complex order. They were ordering a whole bunch of stuff. But to just show up in Germany and speak French, or just show up in Germany and speak English. And it has always been remarked that what the Spanish hated about British tourists was that the British tourists would come to Spain, I think to Portugal also, and they would just presume that they could speak English everywhere. Again, not even making an effort to simplify and speak slowly and communicate, not even making an effort to pick up a little bit. So there are different factors that push and pull at me, all right? Let's keep it real. I'm 41 years old right now. I make weightlifting a certain kind of priority in my life. Okay, I was bench pressing 240 pounds, and I thought about it. Do I want to put in the hours to raise my total to be bench pressing 270 pounds? Didn't do it. Well, stay tuned to this channel. We'll see if I get motivated to go from 240 to 270 in terms of my bench press. I could. It's attainable. I could be bench pressing 270 pounds, and I know exactly the process and the pacing and the opportunity costs, like what you can do and what you can't do, what goes into that if you want to make that transition, all right? I think for most people, if you're not really experienced with language learning, language teaching, and acquisition like me, by contrast, it's impossible for you to visualize, it's impossible for you to estimate what kind of sacrifice you'd be making in getting level 1 in a language, or however you think of it, going up to levels 2 and 3, what the sacrifice is going to be, what you're going to have to invest in it to get something out of it, to get a certain level of ability out of it. And there's a lot of self-deception that goes in, okay? Now, of the two, what is more attainable? Increases in physical strength or increases in language ability? What I want to say to you sincerely here, at age 41, do I have 20 years of experience with language learning at this point? I don't know. Whatever it is, I have a lot of years with a lot of languages from a lot of different language families. And again, I've really seen how, for my girlfriend, in just 2 years, she started learning Chinese with me. She's also worked on French. Briefly, she worked on Hebrew, which is interesting, modern Hebrew. Now briefly working on modern Greek. But there have been a number of languages she looked at where I said to her, look, kind of figure out what you're missing with this. And she's been with me when I was speaking Thai in Thailand. She's seen me speaking a bunch of languages in front of her, reflecting my weird past with all these other languages. Right, once I spoke Laotian. I couldn't switch into when we were in France. But that was so hard because I was speaking, my mind was in French. And it was so hard for me to pull my mind back into using vocabulary from Laotian. Anyway, another Asian language I studied. What I want to emphasize is I think people underestimate the extent to which learning a language is biologically limited. All right? Let's just indulge in an appeal to nature fallacy here. Come along with me for a sec. I admit this is fallacious reasoning, but it's illustrative and you'll see why. All right? The natural process of language acquisition is of a baby breastfeeding, hearing its mother speak, right? Of gradually picking up the distinctions between different word forms and morphemes and what have you, listening to the parents, and sorry to be so heteronormative, but naturally, appeal to nature fallacy here, naturally, you're going to have one set of parents speaking one language. You're not going to be raised by 4 sets of parents speaking 4 languages and giving you diglossia and so on, right? And then you're going to make a transition into adulthood where you gradually pick up on subtle distinctions of, register and cadence and sophistication and what have you. And this is going to progress, again, naturally without written language, without any conscious awareness of etymology. Very often, people develop a cognition of language. And again, anthropologists study this, without knowing the difference between a noun and a verb and this kind of thing. So when anthropologists are in the field and they're really working with people who have no history of literacy, one of the things that makes it so difficult to learn their language is that they don't have a meta-language. They don't have a way of explaining to you how their language works. They are only accustomed to transmitting their languages from mother to child in this way without relying on like a concept like grammar or grammatical analysis or drawing charts or parts of speech or breaking a word into pieces. They're just rote memorization of its purest form is how language goes from father to son, from mother to child, so on and so forth. There was a fascinating example. This is a true anthropological anecdote. There were 2 anthropologists. I think they were husband and wife. So these were European people, I think. Maybe they were American. But anyway, they were outsiders living with a tribal group that had never had writing. And they were really working hard analytically to write the people's language down. Like every time they'd ask them something, they'd ask, okay, so what's the word for stone? And they'd write it down and they'd practice it. They'd make sure they were pronouncing it correctly. Okay, so that's stone, 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 stone. They'd practice it. And then when they were out walking in the jungle with these people, they'd say, oh, stone, And the native people, they'd all laugh at them. They'd find this hilarious. They were wrong. And the native people would say something different. They'd have a different word. And so this went on. I mean, I could say for years, but I think it was just months. But for months, they were out living with these people, and they couldn't understand. And naturally, these are university-educated people who are using all the sophisticated methods of kind of linguistic analysis, to record this language and so on. And what it came down to was that this was a language in which the names for things were different based on their position relative to the speaker. So a stone in front of you wasn't the same as a stone behind you. This kind of thing, right? So out of context, you have to grasp this. And of course, so many languages, if you don't think of them analytically, how would someone figure out, masculine and feminine and neutral gender and all of these things, So, all right, long story short, many of the people here on the internet are selling you this notion that you're doing something positive and regenerative and rejuvenating in learning a second language. And there is absolutely no evidence for that. Okay? There is absolutely no evidence that regressing to that childlike part of your brain and forcing memorization of new vocabulary and the creation of parallel structures of meaning and reasoning is positive for you rather than negative. None. All right? And when you look at that, again, I'm making an appeal to nature fallacy here, but I'm also making a kind of appeal to abstract reasoning argument here. Let's say you have a talented 25-year-old in university who's all his life has been doing advanced mathematics under every heading. So geometry, trigonometry, calculus, what have you. And then you say to him at age 25, you know what you should really do? You should go back to basics and learn how to do these same calculations and learn how to write these same equations using a completely different system of notation, a completely different system of symbols, and instead of using base 10, use base 12. So the actual underlying counting of the numbers is different. And this will somehow be good for you and make you a better mathematician. So you're going to have to learn to think about and think in terms of doing multiplication. You're going to have to learn the times tables again. You're going to have to learn, and again, with most people, when you learn a foreign language, the most frustrating and boring part, nobody really wants to learn to do long division in Chinese. To speak in large numbers of millions and tens of thousands and do math in a foreign language. I think not even the most, philosophically motivated language learner really wants to do this. Memorizing the names of the months is also not very, months and days of the week. Nobody likes that stuff either. Maybe interested in something more philosophical or political or more meaningful to us, right? But again, okay, Now, there may be an argument here that mathematics itself, there's no role for nature. Like, we can't make this appeal to nature fallacy. I'm saying and say, well, naturally you'd grow up with your mother breastfeeding and learn how to do math in the home, okay? So geometry and trigonometry and calculus, I'm completely willing to concede in this case we're talking about something outside the scope of nature in a way that just verbal communication is not. But that's more like written communication, okay? There is nothing in nature that resembles the Japanese hiragana writing system. There is nothing in nature that resembles the Chinese system of the Kangxi radicals and these symbols and logarithms. There's nothing in nature that resembles the Latin alphabet either. So it's completely unnatural in the same sense that geometry and so on and so forth. Okay, so we accept this. But nevertheless, choosing as an adult to regress and start again at basics, start again at the rudiments of reasoning, why would that be a good thing? Why would that be positive for you? And I just mentioned one of the most hotly contested ideas in linguistics is actually the argument, every linguistics professor has a kind of thesis on this, is that language fundamentally is not a method of communication. Language is a method of thought formation. We all know this. We dream in language, right? Our ideas of things are shaped, again, any professor teaching linguistics can now launch into a lengthy set of examples, including the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis and all these kind of well-polished anecdotes, that the way we perceive things, the way we think about things, the way we understand things, of course is shaped by language. And most of us within our own lives, if you think about your childhood, you can probably remember how you thought of the world differently before you really understood what gravity was. Oh yeah, and then I had my way of visualizing the world, before you understood what the model of the atom was, atoms and molecules, and what the difference was between a chemical reaction and a physical reaction. This is very crude, really, but this kind of scientific understanding, it changes the way you perceive the world. Language changes the way you perceive the world much more profoundly. So again, in some languages, they don't differentiate green and blue. In some languages, they don't differentiate orange and red. And then in some languages, they have much more precise categories for different colors. There were a million anecdotes like this, all right? But yes, an example that came from a Chinese professor. A Chinese professor complained to me. I wonder if she had other specific complaints of this. She said the problem with talking to Chinese students about politics was that they cannot differentiate rule of law from simply ruling by law, like just the fact that there is rule of law at all. So sorry. And of course, the hilarious thing about this example is in English they're very confusing. Okay, so rule of law meaning the quality of law and order, as opposed to just the rule of a particular law, the fact that there are laws and rules at all, right? So this is an observation she had after struggling with getting students to understand Western concepts of political science. But of course, in our own language, these are quite unclear. All those ideas of right and human rights, and everything built into political and social reasoning. And as I mentioned to my mother recently, it's remarkable. Almost 100% of the words we have for politics in English are from ancient Greek. So we still rely on vocabulary from Aristotle for democracy, aristocracy, oligarchy, the word politics itself, so on and so forth. So there was a time in England, you could look at, I've never looked at this, what was the vocabulary in Old English before all this Greek vocabulary washed up on shore, and did they have it? So these might be interesting questions to answer. And likewise, by the way, in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, but even Indonesia and Malaysia, you will find almost all of the political vocabulary is from Pali and Sanskrit. Sanskrit is the language associated with Hinduism. Pali is the language associated with Buddhism. They are very, very similar languages, both from ancient India. So you have this whole vocabulary that comes out of that, which includes, words they still use today for equality and democracy and human rights and stuff like that. They take a lot of that from Pali and Sanskrit. So, okay. The idea here is that language is not merely about communicating with other people. It's about forming your own thoughts. That the formation of it's how we think to ourselves is language, all right? And yes, it may be somewhat thrilling to reach a level in a language where you start dreaming in that language, where you start thinking in it when there's no one else around. When you were alone, that happened with Laotian. I reached the point where I was actually thinking in Laotian to some, okay, Why is this good? Why is this positive? In this case, there's no comparison to lifting weights. I can't compare this to physical development. It's not like returning to being weak or something. It's not like starting to lift weights a different way. I guess you could compare it to you've completely mastered baseball, and then you're going to completely stop playing baseball and start playing ice hockey or something, a different set of skills. You could try to come up with this. But still, you don't dream in ice hockey. You don't think in ice hockey. You don't reason. It's not fundamental to philosophy and development. Okay? So we're at this interesting point where we're looking at the juncture of biology and, frankly, the biological limits of learning, right? The fact that our capacity to learn itself is a product of human evolution, right? And we're looking at this really weird kind of outer limits of philosophy. What's at the most basic and crude level of how we philosophize, how we think about life, how we perceive the world. And it's all being eroded. It's all being monkeyed with. You're imperiling it all by learning a new language. And guys, I totally get it. If you're monolingual, if you've only spoken English your whole life, I know it can be really inspirational for those people. Like, they convert to Hinduism and they start learning Sanskrit and they go, wow, here's this whole new vocabulary for thinking about philosophy and religion and politics and the meaning of life that comes out of Sanskrit, comes out of it. And that may be thrilling to you. I get it. Probably for a lot of Christians, historically, it was when they first studied Latin. Right, their first encounter with, wow, here are all these new ideas and new way of thinking, new way of seeing the world. Maybe it was ancient Greek, maybe it was Hebrew, for people who approach the Bible through Hebrew or something, okay? Let me tell you something. When you've done it with like 6 different languages, maybe I'm in the unique position to really cynically warn you that no, going back to basics, let's just stick with the numbers. Learning the numbers again in Korean, there is absolutely nothing positive or healthy or rejuvenating or nothing. It just breaks you down. It's just forcing you back to that primitive, child-minded, view of the world. And to start with learning the numbers 1 to 10 in Korean, and then to force yourself to be able to make change, so you buy something or sell something, to subtract and add quickly and say, oh, okay, it's $20.50, so I'm going to give you $15 to do that in Korean, to build that up again, okay? And then maybe you do long division and multiplication. Let's just stop it there. I'm not even getting into advanced geometry or trigonometry or something, not such advanced reasoning, advanced economics or something. Yeah, that's really tough, doing economics and quote-unquote business English, but financial calculations in a foreign language. Okay, and then let's say 1 year from now, you say, okay, so I've done that with Korean. Now I'm going to start again with Turkish. I'm going to start again with a totally different language. How is that good for you? How does that make you a better person? How does that make you smarter? Okay, what I see here on the internet is a kind of baseless fetishization of language learning, as if this is the key to being intellectual. So again, out of these 2 books, which one will really develop me as an intellectual? So if I read this book, which is some kind of sophisticated analysis of Chinese history and politics, what's wrong with how Chinese democracy works and doesn't work and corruption, okay? I haven't read it yet, but I assume it's a good book. Is that going to make me a more sophisticated, more intelligent person? Or this? Or memorizing a bunch of sentences, some of which are as simple as the cat saw the mouse, the cat jumped off the wall to eat the mouse. The point is to learn grammar and vocabulary. But at that child level, that child part of your mind, that part of your brain that you may not have exercised since you were a baby in your mother's arms, and that is as rudimentary as learning the numerals again and again and again. So this video is inspired by Lindy Boats. I have no idea how to pronounce her name. I don't even know what language her name is in, to be honest with you. This girl who is on YouTube boasting that in the next year, in the year 2020, the year 2020, she is going to devote herself to studying 12 languages simultaneously. And what I really want you to question in this video is, why would that be a good thing? I have to question myself. To what extent is it a good thing to devote my time to bench pressing 200 pounds or 240 pounds or 270 pounds? I have to question that, There's a certain kind of meaninglessness to that. But you know what? I am actually completely confident that whether I bench press 200 pounds or 240 pounds or 270 pounds, that I'm not doing myself any harm. If it's 500 pounds, maybe I'm doing myself some harm. By the way, there's a limit to this comparison, all right? Okay? And I would point out to you that not only is there no basis whatsoever for the optimism that you're making yourself a better person, that you're becoming profounder by leaps and bounds, by learning the numbers again in Korean, in Japanese, in Turkish, and all these different... No, there's no basis for that. Actually, if you think about this skeptically, whether you're willing to indulge in the appeal to nature fallacy or not, or whether you're willing to think of it purely in a philosophical way, like abstract reasoning, like math and geometry on a chalkboard, there's actually reason to be skeptical here that you may be doing yourself irreparable harm.